Look, Bumble knows you're exhausted by dating. All the must not take yourself too seriously and 6'1" since that matters. And what do I even say other than hey? Well, that's why they're introducing an all-new Bumble with exciting features to make compatibility easier, starting the chat better, and dating safer. They've changed, so you don't have to. Download the new Bumble now.
One of the things I think is really important to pay attention to and to talk to your kids about is that at some point, if you're going to repair a relationship, you have to be talking to the person you want to repair with more than you're talking to other people about that person. The more that they're going over the hurts and the pain, and they're not actually talking to the person who they're in the relationship with, that's a warning sign, and that's a behavior, that's a pattern that you want to help your kids deal with, because it's easy to do.
Welcome to Season 6 of Flusterclux with Lynn Lyons, where we talk about a family's anxiety and all the big feelings, too. We tackle the serious stuff without being too serious, and I'm your co-host, Robin. I'm Lynn's sister-in-law, and I'm here to ask your questions.
And I'm Lynn Lyons. I'm an anxiety expert, speaker, mom, and author, and I've been a therapist for over 30 years. Parenting can be a Flusterclux, and I'm here to help you find your way. I'll give you concrete steps to take and the words to say.
So, Lynn, are we talking about dermatology today?
Do you mean having a thick skin?
No, I mean, you said we're going to talk about rupture and repair, so I just think of all of those zit shows.
Oh, yeah. Pimple popper?
I know some people are so into that, and I think that that's bizarre.
Okay, well, I'm not so into it, but I will tell you that there is something very satisfying about watching somebody get a huge pimple popped. The same with my sister, who is so squeamish. We love a good zit. But anyway, we're not talking about that today.
What is rupture and repair in the context of this show?
Okay, in the context of this show, rupture and repair is when something goes wrong in a relationship, and then how do you repair it? And the reason that it's so important is because rupture is inevitable. Even in the best relationships, you're going to have some sort of disagreement, or there's going to be something that sort of pulls you apart. And sometimes rupture happens and we don't repair it, and there's good reasons to not repair it.
Are you talking about conflict in a pretty general sense, or a specific escalated type of conflict?
Rupture is a pretty strong word. So it's more than a disagreement. It's really where you feel like you're at an impasse and the relationship goes off the rails for whatever reason.
So it's like conflict, but with pus.
Yes, it's a pus-filled conflict.
I am so sorry, listeners, that we started down this.
That explodes.
I'm so sorry. You're not grossed out. I'm pretty grossed out.
Yeah. All right. Well, see, we meet all the needs of our audience, because there are some people who are like, oh yeah, I love it. And other people are like, oh my God, please shut up. We're going to have a hard time letting go of this metaphor. So just be warned, everybody. A happening, a fight, a disagreement where bad things happen, where it gets big, where it gets powerful.
Where you think that there's a chance of termination of a relationship.
Right. And sometimes that does happen. So we don't have to repair all relationships. But I think the important thing, as we're talking about in the context of helping our kids, is that there is a lot of talk right now about rupture, and there's not a lot of talk about repair. And in fact, I hear very little about repair. And if we go on TikTok or we go on Instagram, there's a lot about rupture, and there's also a lot about boundaries. I feel like this language of sort of setting boundaries and toxic relationships and taking care of yourself and not letting people take advantage of you has gotten a little distorted, and that we haven't really been focusing on the skills of repair. And we've been sort of falling prey to this idea, or falling prey to this concept that after you have a conflict with someone, you have to set boundaries and you have to stake your ground. I just think it's getting a little overdone in a way that's not helpful, particularly for adolescents.
I've heard you say in the past that you feel like a lot of people misunderstand boundaries, and in the name of boundaries, they're really just being inflexible and not being mature in a dynamic. my boundaries tell me I don't have to put up with you, or
Right. If you can't respect my boundaries, then I'll have nothing to do with you. Like it's a very sort of all or nothing approach. I was eager to get over the pandemic. I was eager to not have us keep talking about the pandemic. I was getting a little concerned about the language that we were using to talk about the damage that the pandemic caused and all this kind of stuff, because you know how I feel about catastrophic stuff. But I will say that what I am seeing now, a few years after the pandemic, is the long-lasting effect of kids not having face-to-face practice with relationships. And they're sort of filling the gap with a lot of this social media stuff that's really not very helpful. During the pandemic, teens and tweens, they missed out on a lot of valuable practice time. I heard Esther Perel say recently that play and all of this interaction that we have when we're younger is really our apprenticeship for healthy adult relationships. And so we know that the pandemic got in the way of that. What I see as a sort of leftover or as a holdover from that period of disconnection with kids is that they are really moving away from face-to-face or even voice-to-voice contact. They are avoiding the discomfort of conversations. Their isolation during the pandemic really sort of reinforced that we can have relationships without actually being in the presence of another person. And I think that we're seeing some of the impact of that right now. And I'm also seeing the impact of this idea of boundaries becoming kind of a group activity. You're in a group chat or you're on social media, and this whole idea that we're going to cut you off or we're going to cut somebody off is really contagious in a way that's very unhealthy.
in the name of boundaries, we're going to cut you out.
Yeah, in the name of boundaries. If you can't handle me, then you get none of me. That's something that I hear. Like, if you can't handle all of me, if you can't appreciate all of my qualities, then I am not having anything to do with you. And that's a very all or nothing, black or white approach to relationships, which doesn't teach kids, it doesn't show kids how to come in and repair after there's some sort of explosion, after there's some sort of disruption, after there's some sort of problem.
Yeah, the irony. This is the generation that accuses us of not understanding how to be so fluid. They need to be fluid here.
Exactly. Yes. It is also the generation, ironically, that is more connected than ever because they are on their phones and they are constantly sort of hearing and seeing and learning about what other people are doing. And yet they're incredibly disconnected and very lonely often too. They talk a good game of sort of how do we accept and how do we not put people in boxes and how do we allow people, like you say, to be fluid. But man, they draw those boundaries really strictly and strongly in a way that I think I see the ramifications of that. I also think that we're seeing, I'm going to classify you with this language. And they will say, we don't like labels. We shouldn't label people. But labeling people with personality disorders, the word narcissism has become very, very popular among young people. Like, that person is narcissistic. That person has a borderline personality disorder. And those labels are really becoming an excuse to set boundaries that are oftentimes not healthy and maybe not entirely necessary. It's that all or nothing thing that I'm really noticing.
So you're seeing a bunch of teenagers who are not mental health professionals assigning diagnostic labels to their peers and calling them these certain things when they are bothered.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then deciding to say, like, okay, you're out. You're a narcissist. You're out.
Right. If you are this kind of person, then I have a boundary that means that I won't associate with that kind of personality, or I won't associate with that kind of behavior. And the way that it comes across when I hear it and when I see it on social media is I am going to set this boundary, and it is going to be in stone, and it is going to be permanent, and it is going to be justified. But I'm not going to really value the importance of this relationship. So it's very all or nothing. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, as I often say. And what goes around comes around, because there are certain things that are sort of back in style. And the cutting off of family members was a really big deal in the late 80s and 90s. A lot of therapists were promoting it. It was a time of cutting people out of your life, of eliminating them. And I'm talking like siblings, parents, children. It was very, very dramatic. And I see that coming back now. That was based a lot on what the mental health field was talking about in terms of accusations. When I hear somebody say, my truth is my truth, and I'm speaking my truth, and if you can't accept my truth, then you have no part in my life. That really sounds like the late 80s, early 90s to me. And that was not a healthy way of managing relationships and of recognizing the value of repairing relationships and of even having difficult relationships with people. It's just too all or nothing for me.
Let's take a break.
If you are a mom who's trying to keep your calendar organized, keep your family's appointments where they need to be, then I'll tell you, the Skylight calendar is a product that you ought to check out. You know how it is. Running a household can be pure chaos and it can be so stressful. This is why you need to check out the Skylight calendar. It is going to make your life easier, Mom. It really is. The Skylight calendar is a smart touchscreen calendar and organizer for all your chores, groceries, to-do lists, and a great way to manage appointments to make sure they never overlap and they're never missed. It helps keep busy households on track so families can get time back for moments that really matter. The Skylight calendar is so easy to use and to set up. It's not going to frustrate you. You're going to be able to get it going within minutes. It syncs events from other family calendars, including Google, Apple, Outlook. You can add events directly using the touchscreen or with the free Skylight mobile app. Updates to linked calendars will automatically appear on the Skylight calendar at home. So no more worrying that you guys are going to forget something. No more cluttered paper calendars. It shows all family events together in one spot. The events are color coded so you can easily see what everyone has going on each week. When the calendar's not in use, you can turn it into a digital picture frame. It's 100% satisfaction guaranteed. If you don't love the Skylight calendar, you'll receive a full refund. They offer a 120-day money-back guarantee and free returns. You can't beat it.
I think the feature that I love most is the collaborative way we can all add to the grocery list. And then when I'm ready to place an online order, whether I'm at home or my office, I have that list and there's no more items that we forget.
So, as a special time-limited offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight calendar when you go to skylightcal.com/Flusterclux. That's SKYLIGHTCAL.com/Flusterclux. Mother's Day is coming right up, so order today to get 15% off your purchase at skylightcal.com/Flusterclux.
You know, when you're listening to a song on the radio and you just have this feeling that the song was written about you or that it was someone that you love trying to say something to you? Well, now imagine the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song that actually is about them and about your relationship, and that Songfinch writes just for you. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people that you love. It's completely unique, it's personal, and it lasts forever. I had the pleasure of creating a family song with Songfinch about our summer celebrations that we have every year. I knew it was going to make everybody cry, and it certainly did. I got to be honest, I was even crying, giving all of the information and helping personalize my song with the writer that I chose. He absolutely delivered a beautiful acoustic song that captured exactly what I was looking for, and it was so fun to share with the family. So whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, a wedding or an anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. Don't waste another dollar on more stuff. It only takes 4 to 7 days, but that song will last forever. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person or people can listen to it anywhere, anytime. So go to songfinch.com/fluster and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, the URL is songfinch.com/fluster. Don't forget to share your song with us too in our Facebook group, songfinch.com/fluster.
I really have to pay attention to hydrating properly. I work out a lot. I talk all the time, as you know. I am pretty active and I don't drink enough water. So I'm constantly thinking about how it is that I am going to hydrate in the best way possible. And I'll tell you, if my water has a little bit of flavor, it's so much easier for me. And if I can get those electrolytes, if I can get more bang for my buck, it's just so much better. I have been using Liquid IV. I put it into a huge glass. I put it into the refrigerator. It's cold. It's very tasty. I've been putting it in my water bottle when I go to the gym. The packaging is so convenient. I actually look forward to drinking it, which is not something that comes naturally to me. I love the lemon lime flavor. They've got a sugar-free option that is really great. So I think that if you're somebody like me that has a difficult time getting in the amount of hydration that you need for your body, Liquid IV is a great option. One stick, 16 ounces of water, it hydrates better than water alone. It's got 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, and it doesn't have all that sugar. It doesn't have artificial sweeteners. 8 vitamins and nutrients just for your everyday wellness. It's non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. However you hydrate, grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier, sugar-free in bulk, nationwide at Costco, or get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com and use code FLUSTER at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code FLUSTER at liquidiv.com. Okay, we're back.
You were just talking about this 80s and 90s trend where therapists were more apt to encourage cutting off a family member. And now you're seeing teenagers sort of cutting out friends.
Mm-hmm. And family members.
Yeah,
but a lot of it does have to do with their peers and friends and who they're going to associate with. Yeah.
And I guess this is where the repair conversation begins, because there's a question of when you have this big rupture, how justified was the rupture? And was the rupture something that you should move through, or was the rupture something that means you really should distance yourself from that person?
Right. And that's the differentiation that we always want to make. Don't misunderstand me. There are some times when you really do want to let go of people in your life. There are some times when a relationship is not worth it, where you've tried, or maybe you discover something about a person and you realize, that's not the kind of person that I want to be connected to.
Let's talk about that for a second. When you have teenage clients in your office and they do decide that they want to break away from a friend and they've had this, what would scenarios be where you would encourage that?
And we've even talked about a few of them in previous episodes. If you have a friend that's really engaging in some very unhealthy or dangerous behavior, and they expect you to either participate in it or to fix it, that is really an appropriate time for a teenager to set a pretty clear boundary with a peer. Like, say you have a friend who's developing a substance use problem. Say you have a friend who is repeatedly doing things that are hurtful to other friends in your group. And even though you've tried to address it and try to talk about it, that friend is not taking any responsibility for what they're doing, right? As I always say, the person who doesn't own their own stuff. It may be that you had a relationship where that friend made it clear that their expectations of you were that you were to behave in a certain way, or that you were supposed to be incredibly accommodating to their behavior. Maybe they want you to lie for them. All of those things where you might say, this person has different values than I have. They're showing me aspects of their personality that I don't want to engage with. Or this person has just repeatedly hurt me and has not taken any responsibility for it, or has not done anything that lends me to believe that they are interested in owning their own stuff in order to repair. Because that's a huge part of repairing.
Okay. So those are really good examples of the friends that we need to cut loose. But the tricky thing, I guess we'll get into this, is that sometimes that person is in the family and it's trickier to do that with family members. And therefore, it's not so easy to do. Fortunately, I think that happens less because I think the friend conflict is more likely to be something that the teenager's experiencing.
Yeah. An example that it comes up a lot with family is that, say a family goes through a divorce. And so now we have this sort of natural lines of delineation, this side of the family and that side of the family. And when kids are put in a position in which one family member is throwing the other family member under the bus, where there is such conflict between the parents and then by extension to the extended family, and oftentimes there is a decision by the adults in the family that they are going to cut off all contact with the other side of the family after a divorce. That's a pretty significant rupture. How then are the children growing up? Do they want to have relationships with their cousins? Do they want to see people on the other side of the family that they don't have access to? That can be really difficult in families. Certainly it happens with siblings, that there are times where you cut a sibling out of your life or something happens and they're not able to repair that relationship. So it happens in families in a way in which there is some sort of harm that's been done or some sort of conflict, and then the decision is made, that person is out. And oftentimes with those families, if that were to happen, if I were to ask what was done to try and repair that relationship, sometimes the families say, well, not much. And then I say, well, if you wanted to repair that relationship, or if you decided that relationship was worth repairing, what would you do? And a lot of times people do not know how to even start the process of repair. So the first thing is, there are people that we end relationships with because you really see no reason to have that person in your life, or the damage has been pretty significant. But the second question, which I think is more interesting, and particularly when we're talking to teenagers, is when there is a rupture, what are the skills that we need in order to repair? What do you do? What does that take? What does that require of you? And I think that's something that we need to talk about with kids. I think it's really helpful to do that when kids are younger in their friendships, because just like Esther Perel says, those friendships and that relationships we have when we're younger are really the apprenticeship for the relationships that we have later in life.
Yeah, no, there's always that moment in most kids between 3rd and 8th grade, there's going to be at least one friend breakup.
Yeah. And that's very natural. During middle school, there's usually a lot of reorganization of friendships because you begin to discover your own interests. Parents are no longer the ones that are kind of orchestrating the relationships, because a lot of our early friends are based on our interests or based on the fact that our parents are friends and they hang out together. So there's absolutely going to be shifts and changes in relationships. What happens when there is some sort of conflict or some sort of abruption in a relationship that you then want to repair? How do you coach your kids through that? I think that's something that we want to pay attention to.
So how do you do that?
Okay, so let's just say that you're trying to walk your child through repairing something after a rupture, or you're modeling repairing something after a rupture. There are a few things you want to think about, and there's some language that you want to use. First of all, like I said, you have to decide whether or not it's worth it. Let's just assume that in this situation, you decide it's worth trying to repair. The repair is worth it for you for whatever reason. The first thing you have to do is you have to look at your own part in the rupture, because there will be no repair if it's completely one-sided. Now, look, if it is completely one-sided, that may be a relationship that you don't decide to repair. So let's just say we've got conflict and we can see that it's a workable thing. How do you own your own part of it? How do you step back? How do you help your child own their own part of it? Because remember, I always say that the hardest people for me to work with are the people that don't own their own stuff. So what is your part in it? That's a huge first step. And then the second thing is, do you have realistic expectations of this person? Are you expecting them to behave in a way that makes it impossible for them to stay in your good graces? Are you expecting that they will never say the wrong thing, or that they won't screw up, or that they won't disappoint you? If your expectations of people are that rigid, then it's going to be really hard to repair the relationship, because flexibility is really important. An example I see in this a lot is that young parents oftentimes will have very rigid expectations about what relatives are supposed to do with their young children, right? If you have a baby. And I have talked to many people who have cut off relationships with their parents after they have a baby because the parents won't do the things exactly the way that they demand that they do them. You will hear a lot. People say, well, you know what? It's my child and I have a right to be very clear about what the expectations are. And I'm not talking about doing things like, I'm not going to use a car seat, or I'm going to feed him chocolate, or a little whiskey in a teething child's gums is good. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. But where are you being rigid? And you want to talk to your children about that too. Where are the ways in which you are being rigid, and how are you going to be more flexible with this person if you want the relationship to continue?
One of the things I would bring up about both of those examples, I was thinking of a couple of squabbles that happen with my own kids and friendships. And I think that there are a lot of things going on. An act of betrayal where you tell somebody something you weren't supposed to, or you embarrassed a person, or you did something like that. People do make mistakes. And so I think it's important to coach your child through the whole context of the friendship. They made a really bad choice here, but is this an ongoing pattern that they're always embarrassing you? Or do they always lie to you? You have to learn how to say, this was like a really bad decision that they made that had a big impact, or this is a pattern that they're doing this all the time.
Right. Does this person have values, or does this person have an approach to life? Does this person consistently behave in relationships in a way that's not compatible with who you are? Yes, so that's a very good point. That's an important distinction, because what I'm seeing in this all or nothing sort of setting boundaries thing is that if you do this one thing to me, I am done with you. I am setting a boundary, and if you make a mistake, if you disclose the secret you weren't supposed to disclose, or you did something, I am done with you. That's a really important distinction. Is this a pattern? Is this the way they live their life? Or is this something that they're going to own and that then you can work through?
There's actually a whole Netflix movie about this that's a really great example, but it was Adam Sandler's Families. They all starred in this film, two best friends, and then one of the girls ended up receiving the attention of the boy that the other girl really liked. So that caused an eruption in the relationship. And then that eruption led to a few more decisions and choices made in a state of real anger. And then all of a sudden, repair was really like the goal. I overreacted and I want to repair this relationship. And the movie was all about repairing that friendship.
I'm thinking about this sad rupture in a friendship that I had, and we were in our early 20s, and we ultimately repaired it. But a lot of it was that we were both kind of in a stressed out place. And one of the things I think is really important to pay attention to and to talk to your kids about is that at some point, if you're going to repair a relationship, you have to be talking to the person you want to repair with more than you're talking to other people about that person. If you listen to kids and you listen to teenagers sometimes, the more that they're talking about the other person, the more that they're throwing the other person under the bus, the more that they're going over the hurts and the pain, and they're not actually talking to the person who they're in the relationship with, that's a warning sign. And that's a behavior, that's a pattern that you want to help your kids deal with, because it's easy to do.
It's really easy for a lot of adults to still do this.
It is so easy to do. Repairing relationships takes a lot of vulnerability. You have to step into this place of, hi, this is awkward, this is uncomfortable.
100%. Even if you have an issue as an adult and there's some sort of rupture, we clearly want to talk about it, because it was a very emotional experience we're trying to sort out. But then we always want to sort it out with everyone but the person we need to sort it out with.
Right. The rupture that I had, I think back on it, and it's so clear to me now that I'm 58 and not 22. The way that we repaired this relationship is that by pure coincidence, we ran into each other in a bathroom at Logan Airport.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we were like best buddies. And when we saw each other, we both burst into tears.
Oh.
Right? Because the pain of this broken relationship, it hurt both of us so much. Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. So we saw each other and then we just burst into tears. And then that became the start of us being able to repair it. I do wonder what would have happened if we hadn't run into each other in the bathroom. And we ran into each other soon after all of it went down. Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal.
I have a friend who we had a falling out. And as adults, she just reached out to me and said, I'm sorry. And it was so awesome that she did that because we were kids. You don't know all these skills when you're kids. You're still learning those. I was so impressed with that. And I just decided anyone who has that level of maturity and that intention to just own it and reconnect, we're really good friends again. I'm just so grateful she reached out.
We've talked about that on a past podcast of when you lose touch with somebody and you're like, oh, it would be awkward if I reached out, or she hasn't heard from me for a while. And then when you're on the receiving end of that and somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, we haven't talked for a long time and I miss you. And if there was a problem, I'm sorry for what happened between us. I think most of us are rather touched by that.
Absolutely. Let's take a break. I love all this happy repair talk.
No one told us the truth about parenthood. Why? This is the podcast everyone needed before they had kids, because now that those little ones are here, there is a lot to unpack. I'm Rachel Shepardota, and I am your host for the podcast No One Told Us, where we tell the truth about parenting and let you in on all the stuff you really should have known about before having kids. I am the founder of Hey Sleepy Baby, but this podcast is so much more than sleep. We'll be diving into all the topics that you really care about and need to know while you do your best job raising those adorable, tiny humans. Our goal is to just make you feel less alone and less overwhelmed. There are so many things that no one tells us before becoming a parent, and I think that we should really pull back the curtain on becoming a first-time or second-time mom or dad to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll have a little education, a little fun, and a whole lot of heart that goes into each and every episode. So join me and our amazing guests each week to hear us talk about what no one told us.
Feel like you're the martyr in your family? You're not alone. Hey, this is Joanne.
And Bree.
And we're from the No Guilt Mom podcast. Bree, we talk to a lot of moms.
Yeah, we sure do.
And if you're a mom who has a to-do list that is so massive that you get overwhelmed and you shut down,
or if you fall into the habit of doing everything for everyone and don't know how to change it, we can help you become a no-guilt mom.
we're going to take you from family martyr to family model. That's role model, so that you role model the behavior that you want to see out of your kids.
You're going to go from being tired and overwhelmed to energized and guilt-free.
Every week, you'll get actionable strategies that you can implement right away from the experts that we interview and from us.
We also have a whole lot of fun, so check out the No Guilt Mom podcast everywhere you listen to your favorite shows.
Okay, so now back to the show. All right, sorry to sort of rain on your happy repair talk, but I'm just going to give you a few more to parents as you're thinking about this. If we're looking at how ruptures happen and how they keep going, let me just give you a few patterns that you want to pay attention to, because these are patterns that are difficult in relationships and they do not foster repair. Okay, you ready? Triangling. That means that you don't talk directly to the person. You talk to other people about the person, but you don't address it directly. Families do that all the time.
And middle schoolers and high schoolers and college students.
Yeah, all the time. Passive aggressive communication. That's really a way to sort of get your barbs in, the way to sort of get your digs in. I tend to think sometimes when kids are trying to repair something, they don't know how to do it. they fall into these ways of communicating and passive aggressive, like, oh, if you wanted to be friends, I guess you would have reached out, things like that. So teach them to speak directly, to ask for what they're looking for, or to own what they need to own directly rather than in that passive aggressive way. And of course, blaming, talked a lot about blaming. We did a whole episode on blaming and how do we own it rather than blame. And then really looking at the pattern of all or nothing thinking. So you're either everything to me or I can't have a relationship with you. You respect me all the time or else you can't be in my life. Those unrealistic all or nothing expectations. Robin, before we got on to do this podcast, I went on social media and I just searched boundaries and I found some quotes that I think are illustrative of the all or nothing sort of boundaries that I'm talking about. So I'm just going to read them to you and get your reaction. You haven't heard them before because I just found them. This was one of the quotes I saw. Don't let the same person disappoint you twice.
And this is a podcast and not a reaction video on YouTube. But my eyes are rolling.
Yeah, so I need a divorce. Yeah, and I can't talk to any of my friends ever again because they've all disappointed me. And I'm sure I've disappointed them. So that's a little harsh. You spent your whole life thinking there are rules. There aren't. What?
It's called social norms.
There are rules, right? You spent your whole life thinking there are rules. There aren't. Yes, there are. I thought that was an interesting statement. Okay, this one was a little interesting to me. Tell me what you think of this one. Find someone who knows you're not perfect, but treats you as if you are.
That one doesn't bother me as much. And then I wish you could see listeners' Lynn's face right now. She's like, give me an effing break.
Okay, Robin just disappointed me, everybody. I have to be done with her now because the first thing was I can't let people disappoint me twice.
Well, I interpret that one, not to defend some silly Instagram post, but I feel like that one's like, I acknowledge you're not perfect, which is fine, but I'm going to treat you as my best option, my best partner, my best mate. That's how I interpret it.
Yes, and if we changed it a little bit, I'd probably be okay with it. It said, find someone who knows you're not perfect, but loves you anyway.
Yes, so that's how I interpret that.
But I don't want someone to treat me as if I'm perfect.
I think the second part of the phrase is misusing perfection in a way that's pretty toxic and common. But like you said, your revision of it is what I think the sentiment was.
Okay,
so we're going to let that one slide.
Okay, all right. We worked through that. Yeah. Okay, so this one truly, I don't know how I feel about this. I'm training my boundaries to be stronger than my empathy. Yeah, so that was a little curious to me. So maybe what they're saying is that for somebody who is so empathic that they let people kind of push them around, like you're too empathic, like you're always giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. You're always being so empathic that you're not holding people accountable. Anyway, those are the phrases that I found, which I thought were interesting. So I give you these because if you are raising a teenager, raising a young person who's spending a lot of time on Instagram and TikTok, these are the phrases that they're hearing. And a lot of them are confusing. A lot of them don't really say what you think that they're saying. These were the ones that I was sort of like, this is kind of confusing to me.
When we were growing up, long before the internet, the kind of motivational self-love, self-help types of quotes, you would go to the Hallmark store, and buy a plaque that would have that, or like a poster. And think of all the production that went into those things. And most of them were pretty banal.
Yeah, it's true.
But now on social media, a bunch of idiots are creating these who don't know what they're talking about. And you have to compete and sort through all of these things that are not necessarily healthy ways of thinking about relationships or your own mental health.
Yeah.
And that's an issue.
I'm thinking of the poster that everybody had with the kitten holding on to the bar. And it said like, hang in there. Right? And so now we have psychobabbled the poster with the kitten.
Right. Actually, we have a joke because there was one of those that I think was hanging on the wall of one of your friends growing up.
Yeah.
And it was of a little toddler sitting on a toilet who had fallen asleep.
Oh, yeah.
And the poster said, "Too tired to tinkle."
Yes, I do remember that. I don't know who. Yes, I could absolutely picture that in my head. Too tired to tinkle.
That's a phrase in our marriage.
Wait, that's a phrase in your marriage? Do you say that to each other a lot?
Well, when you're really, really tired, you look at the other person and say, "I'm too tired to tinkle."
And then what do? You just pee in the bed? You just let it go? Yeah.
No, you let the other person, go to bed or take a nap.
Oh, all right. Well, since we're on potty talk, I just gave this example. We were talking about the unexpected thing that happened to you today and how did you handle it? That's my homework assignment I like to give families. Okay, so listen to what happened to me. My husband and I were gone all day on Sunday, and accidentally, kitten Pippa, who is the love child of Miley Cyrus and a flying squirrel, she's a monster. She accidentally got locked in my waiting room because my office is attached to my house. So we came home after being gone for like 10 hours. We opened the door and she is just beside herself, like, meow, meow, meow. We go, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. Thank goodness, no accidents. Monday morning comes and a client comes first thing in the morning to my office and I invite them in. Come on in. We do our session. They leave. I go out into my waiting room and I'm like, oh my God, what is that smell? I go into the bathroom. Oh God, what did this person do in my bathroom? Little Pippa pooped in the sink in my waiting room. And I had no idea. And my client had used the bathroom and left. So I immediately emailed and said, I am so sorry. I had no idea that my kitten had pooped in the sink and you went in and used the bathroom. I was mortified. I was so mortified. And they very graciously emailed back and said, yes, I know. It's okay. We have pets too. Can you imagine you come to your therapy session and you go to the bathroom and there is a little turd in the sink? What do?
BetterHelp.com.
Yeah. See, that won't happen. That won't happen.
Talkspace.com.
Yeah. Oh my God. So that was the unexpected thing that happened to me. Not good, but we got through it and I handled it directly and I owned it and I was embarrassed. All those things. I was embarrassed. I owned it. I sought forgiveness.
And the relationship did not rupture, but have they been back for another session?
No, but I think that I repaired it, but oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. Thanks for listening. And if you found this podcast helpful, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find this information.
And if you'd like to dig deeper on any of these topics, we have specialized playlists on our Spotify profile, and the link is in the show notes. Topics like teens, depression, and OCD. Bye, Lynn.
Bye, Robin.
I'm Margaret.
And I'm Amy.
And together we host the podcast, What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood.
Margaret, I would say you're sort of a where are my keys kind of mom.
Correct. Sometimes a where are my kids kind of mom. While you're, Amy, more of a we were supposed to leave 35 seconds ago, mom.
I mean, touche. In each episode of What Fresh Hell, we come at a topic from our usually completely opposite perspectives. I bring the research.
And I bring kind of the gimlet eye. Like, is that research really going to work, people?
And almost 10 million downloads later, we're still laughing.
We also talk to experts in the parenting field, plus parents with stories we can all learn from.
We make each other laugh, we challenge each other's assumptions, and we have what we think is the best parenting community on the internet.
Check out What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood wherever you listen to podcasts.